Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this first session of the day. I trust it's not just so you can catch up on your coffee and your emails and you're going to pay attention. Talking of which, mobile phones. Please can you make sure they're on silent? I think as a tech-savvy crowd, we ought to know about these things. And also, if you could take anything that you bring in, if you could take back out with you at the end, that'd be appreciated as well. It just makes a smoother transition between the speaker sessions today. Talking of which, the first session, we actually spent quite a bit of time yesterday talking about brand and how brand was re-emerging. And we've gone from hyper personalized now to thinking about, well, actually, are we all promiscuous about brand still, or are we looking for some reassurance around who we're trading with? Did we perhaps lose sight of that as consumers in the past? And also, I think it's interesting that those of us in this tech bubble or digital bubble tend to forget that we're also consumers as well. So how are we interacting with the brands that we like? How do we find them, engage with them? And that has massively changed. But actually, if you look at the whole cycle, we're coming back to where we started. However, we're able to measure things a little bit more, and that really leads us on to what we're going to talk about next. So, Farzana, a bit about brand, a bit about performance marketing, and hopefully the synchronization of the two. So over to you and your panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to join you guys all in London today. I am joined here on the stage by a bunch of New Yorkers, some really smart expert marketers, and looking forward to having a great discussion on the topic of finding the right balance between brand and performance marketing. This is a topic that many of us have dealt with over the years in our experience trying to grow and scale brands. And just to kind of do a quick poll of the audience, I'd love to get you guys involved. So quick question for you guys. Who here is spending the majority of their marketing budget currently on performance marketing efforts? Lots of hands in the room. Great. And then how about brand marketing? Who here is spending most of their budget on brand marketing? Fewer hands. All right, so hopefully this conversation will help persuade you in a slightly different direction. So that's our challenge for today. I'm going to let the panel do a quick introduction of themselves. If you guys can share your names, company, role, and then also for the benefit of the audience, if you could share a little bit on the scope of your role and what you're responsible for, that would be great as well. Awesome. Yeah, we'll start with you.
I'll start. Alicia, Reich, Vice President Digital Marketing at Movado Group. We're the watch company that makes watches with no numbers, so you've probably seen them. My scope and role is essentially to use data to make money. I'm not the emotion. I truly want to use data to get our brand out there and ultimately hope they're converting somewhere. So within my team's purview is everything from own channels, think email, SMS, CRM. You also have CTV, all paid media channels, whether it's social, display, programmatic search, and then we're also working with linear TV teams, and then also kind of this blended OLV space as well. Think more like YouTube players and owned video players as well. So really supporting full funnel, both brand and performance across the portfolios and globally as well.
It's a great introduction. Watches without numbers.
That's what we do.
Brand starts with that. I'm Michael Challinger, CEO at a company called Houzer. We sell kitchen sinks mostly, some taps as well. I like to say I'm not really a CEO. I spent most of my career in roles probably much like those of you in the audience, as a head of digital, as a head of e-commerce. I was in online retail in the early 2000s, growing a company from nothing to $1 billion. Then I went to the brand side, and I worked for a few different middle market brands from 50 to 500 million, doing what would probably now be considered omnichannel. At the time, the term didn't exist. So about 2 years ago, I came in as CEO here. We're small and scrappy, and so as CEO, I also sort of wear the CDO, CMO hat, and thus I think a lot about the intersection of performance and brand, and I'm the one who has to have those internal arguments with myself in many cases about where we can best balance that, that spend to have the greatest impact on the total effectiveness of our marketing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vivian Chang. I am the VP e-commerce at GNC, which is a supplements, vitamins, protein powder brand globally. So we are actually a supplements retailer. I am very new there. So prior to GNC, I was at Clorox, so traditional CPG company, multiple portfolio of brands where I led direct-to-consumer and helped build that capability within the enterprise. And so my background has been a mix of startups and then into larger enterprises. But what I typically bring is what is the new innovation, what are the new approaches, and how do you help a brand grow through that? And so a lot is things like social commerce, or helped launch a mobile app many, many years ago, programmatic in-housing, and so forth. And so I played on that spectrum of being in places that are heavy performance and then heavy brand, and I think it'll be a fun discussion today.
Thank you all. Yes, looking forward to this discussion. This topic is one of my favorite topics, starting my career in brand management and now driving growth for direct-to-consumer brands. You know, over the last few years, we've all been through this pandemic era period where we've seen, a lot of us have seen double-digit e-commerce growth, and we've also seen considerably rising customer acquisition costs and faced tracking and attribution challenges along the way. So we are now sort of in this post-pandemic stage where we're defining what that looks like from a marketing perspective. We've gone from being very heavily focused on performance marketing, driving growth for us, and now there's an opportunity to think about brand again, and think about our marketing investment from a customer behavior perspective and an attribution perspective in a new way. There was a recent eMarketer study that showed that over a third of marketers are now planning to invest more over the next year in brand marketing efforts. So this is definitely top of mind for people in our industry. So to kick it off, let's level set. What is brand marketing and what is performance marketing? What are the differences? How do they work together? I'll hand it over to you, Vivian, to get us started.
Yeah, sure. This is actually a pretty interesting discussion among us as the panelists. I think that the definition has changed and is still changing, but for our purposes, we're going to keep it really basic. So brand marketing, traditionally upper funnel, focused on awareness, growing, people who know about the brand, who are loyal to the brand, typically longer term, both investments, but also longer term to see the results of that investment. KPIs are things like reach, impressions, and so forth. And then you have performance marketing, which is more of that bottom funnel, right? Short term, maybe it's immediate, within the first 7 days, you're looking to get results, certainly within a quarter or so, and it could be focused on conversions, purchases, and so the KPIs are things like return on ad spend or customer acquisition costs. And so these are, I think, traditionally have been like two sides of the kind of the pendulum, and I think we'll have a discussion on where we are on that pendulum today, and maybe where we're headed as an industry.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the most important decisions that we make in our roles, owning a marketing budget, is investment decisions. How do we allocate our dollars? How do we allocate our resources? And where do we allocate them to drive growth overall? I'd love to throw it over to you guys to talk a little bit about budget allocation. How are you making those decisions today, and what's influencing that?
You want to start, Michael?
Yeah, I can. So it's funny because as you're talking through that, I'm thinking back to the very early days. My interaction with performance marketing goes back to the early 2000s, where performance marketing was basically just giving your credit card to Google. And so back then, it was simple and not simple. There weren't a ton of competitors bidding on your terms. It's grown incredibly complex since then, and as Farzana said, CACs have been rising and rising and rising. And so what I've seen more and more in the industry is brands are going, well, wait a minute, we can't just continue paying this ever increasing tide. We need loyal customers. And so for me, as you think about where you're allocating your dollars, it starts with that fundamental conversation of what you want your brand to be, who your customer is. And so with the business I'm running now, that was the very first evaluation. We had spent basically nothing in brand. It had been all performance marketing. So allocating dollars for us was starting to build that top of funnel. We knew that it was very important that we created brand awareness. We're competing with some of the biggest brands in the world who've spent billions and billions of dollars. They've run linear TV commercials. They've run Saturday Night Live specials. And so we knew that we needed a piece of that brand awareness. And it's actually kind of nice to be the underdog because you can just run ads against your competitors. So for us, it really boils down to we started with 100% performance, and we've begun to slowly chip away at that. We don't necessarily have a hard and fast rule as to we want to spend 80% here, 20% here. But still today, I would have been in that first cohort of you guys in the audience raising my hand that most of our budget is into performance. But we've begun to expand into more and more channels, some of which you'll hear this group talking about today. But so I would say for us, the bottom line is starting with that understanding of where your customer is and what you can do to brand. The other thing for us that was really important was audience segmenting. We had historically only really audience targeted to the consumer. But we're selling a kitchen sink, which is a product with a 10-year buying life cycle. So traditional marketing lifetime value calculations don't really work for us with our consumer because you're not going to go out and buy a customer and have them rebuy from you every year unless they're buying a lot of rental houses, I suppose. And so for us, that initial consideration actually started with going all the way back to who the consumer we wanted was, and it's not actually the consumer, it's the pro. It's the builder, the plumber, the contractor, et cetera. And so that's been an interesting split for us as well, and not just segmenting between brand and performance, but also segmenting within that out to those two different major customer groups.
Did you have, I'm curious, when I came to Movado 6 years ago, one of the biggest conversations around budget was trying to convince the CFO why to change how we were spending, because her point of view was you're spending and you're making money and I can attribute it. Why are you going to change that? Why do you want to spend more? So do you, as your CEO, CMO role, have these also? Are you the CFO, or do you have to have these conversations too?
I have a CFO, so we're owned by like a much bigger global group who's hundreds of millions of dollars out of Israel. And so my CFO technically is there, but day to day, he just sort of hands me the hat and I wear it. I've got a very tall hat rack, as you might imagine. So I would say there was a bit of discussion there, but with this business, it's been largely, we trust you, we brought you in to do this. What I will say is a couple of brands ago, I was working for Dr. Ecker, like a German group, and there was a big internal discussion around brand versus performance there. And really, the nature of that was it was an educational piece, right? It's like, okay, here's how, and a lot of it is remedial. Here's all the different channels that you have. Here's how multi-channel attribution should work. Here's how your customer is interacting across devices and time and channels and things like that. But I mean, I think the point that was made earlier is that performance is so instant gratification. You get that dopamine hit right away. Your CFO or your CEO or your CEO get that like revenue hit, but it's almost like it's very easy. I came into a business that had basically turned all their brand spend top of funnel off, and they didn't understand why their ROAS had gone to absolutely nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like that education piece is so key.
Absolutely. ROAS is like a drug. Like once you're on it, it's really hard to get off this focus on that immediate return. So I hear you. I think that's a great segue into like what the KPIs for brands should be. Measurement is definitely a challenge, and that is what is driving investment in performance versus brand. So I'd love to kind of open it up to you guys. And Alicia, if you want to start on what are the KPIs that you're measuring? How do you measure success from a brand performance campaign?
Yeah, so for us, performance is truly driven by ROAS. And really, I mean, every single day, it's how much money are you making me, how efficiently, what is that net down to profit? And that's truly what everyone's interested in. But a lot more goes into that. So I personally believe in running our ROAS blended, so that way we have flexibility among channels, what's working, we can follow trends, we're able to be very nimble. But then when we were talking about, okay, well now we want to diversify our spend, not just on channels, but what the goal of it was and becoming the ability to have a bit more brand focus, I had to really start at the foundation and go back to my leadership team and talk about the purpose of the funnel traditionally, and then now the funnel's collapsing. And that really the goal is that if you're only spending in the bottom of the funnel, you're not ultimately being able to build and fill your funnel efficiently, so that way you have someone to actually get a nice ROAS from. So really when we're thinking about brand and we're thinking about performance, it can't just be what your end goal is, right? So I think Vivian was talking very nicely around when you think about traditional upper funnel, you're talking about impressions, reach and frequencies, you're talking about total households maybe that you're reaching. And then we always forget and skip over what my favorite part of the funnel is, which is really this more mid-funnel. And if we break it down and less so like textbooky technical, it's really around how you're building that loyalty, right? You're building consideration, you're building top of mind, you're building that desirability. For us, brand investment is truly around building brand equity. And I sell watches that are mostly AOV $1,000 or more, right? So that's not an impulse purchase for most people. A lot of times it's around a holiday moment. I mean, people have birthdays, anniversaries, births all year round. So for us, every moment could be a moment. So really kind of pivoting leadership, pivoting the teams to think about, we need to have this investment going on in brand to build equity. We have brand trackers that we do every quarter to see if we're building our desirability, our awareness in the market. We're looking at share of voice in market. We're looking at search terms, something as simple of, are people searching for your brand more? And then as we move down the funnel, we're thinking about, okay, this brand investment at the top, how is that actually going to help my ROAS? It's not just going to be your ROAS is increasing. Hopefully you're probably growing top line sales as well, but for us, we're also thinking about things like, in our remarketing pools and our remarketing audiences, are we seeing a higher conversion rate? Are people sitting in there less time so that way they're more primed and ready to convert? Are you seeing more engagement in your mid-funnel? So really, you should start to see an increase in KPIs throughout your entire funnel campaigns if they're optimized toward traffic. Are you getting more traffic to site? And what's the quality of that traffic? Are they bouncing or are they staying? So really, we're talking with our leadership teams, with our agencies, with our junior staff around all the KPIs and the benchmarks and the expectations we have to really bring this funnel to life and really start to have that more balanced brand and performance spend.
That's great. I think that idea of improving efficiency at every stage of the funnel and that brand investment delivering that return throughout the customer journey is really important. That on average, there's about 6 touch points to purchase for most brands. So having that right touch point to begin with, I think, is really important. You know, we've heard about companies like Nike who have tons of brand awareness and are not growing because they invested too heavily in performance. So I think at every stage, whether you're a mid-stage or a large public company like Movado, you know, it's still very critical to have that perfect balance.
I wish we only had 6 touches. I'll be the first to say it's like 10 touches and then a break, and then like for 3 months, and then they come back and they're like, right, I loved you. I wanted to buy that for my mom or someone. So it definitely, it costs a lot of money to sell watches, so the more efficiency I can have, everybody's much happier.
You're right, though, with the multi-touch, though. That's why it's so important, I think, to look at your total ROAS, your total spend versus your total revenue. Because, I mean, until someone cracks the code on true multi-touch attribution, which, I mean, like even some of the biggest brands in the world will tell you it's like a laughable goal. There are tech companies probably out here who will build it, they've solved it, but as far as I know, no one has solved the magic equation. And so until then, as Luddite and as simple as it seems, often one of the best feelings for that is looking at your total spend versus your total revenue. And shockingly, a lot of people still don't. No. They're just focused on that one channel. Oh, well, affiliate is driving, you know, a 50-to-1 ROAS. It's like, well, obviously, because you're at the very, very, very bottom of the funnel.
We actually use affiliate very differently. We want affiliate to bring in new people, and then maybe if you're ready and you've been sitting in the funnel for a while, we use it to goose the conversion. Give them a little sweetener, a little cash back, or whatever it might be in each region, because we know it's not doing enough for us to like fully invest, but we know that it is doing something. So it depends on the time of year.
I think so much of, okay, I'm here. I think so much of where brand gets tripped up is like it's not as easy to measure, right? Because it's not you click and then you take an activity on the site. And so a lot of times where our discussions are is aligning the entire executive team on how are we even measuring? And I think it's things like brand studies, having ongoing consumer surveys of what are the adjectives that they're identifying our brand with, because we know that that's going to pay off later. And I'm a big advocate of like, it's really scrappy, but just like a how did you hear about us, like post-purchase survey. We use that to make budget investment changes and decisions, and I'm always surprised. It'll be like, radio is what they remember, and we haven't run radio in the last like 2 months or something like that. And you know, to me, that's how we start to see both the click-based attribution and also more of that like longer halo attribution.
I think it's amazing that, again, coming from Clorox, you're still seeing value out of some of the most basic things like a simple survey. I mean, I think like for me, the message there is that it's not, there's no magic razzle-dazzle that even these giant companies have. The basics still matter, right?
Yeah, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. That's what I tend to always say. How many people in the room have post-purchase surveys implemented on their website today? Great, seeing some good hands up there. Yeah, that is a great way to get direct feedback from your customer. We talk about first-party data. That's a really good source of first-party data to influence your budget decisions. Let's talk about attribution quickly one more time, just at a high level, quick lightning round. What methods are your favorite? What are you leaning into? Like, we have last click, we have MTA, we have incrementality. Is it a little bit of everything? Is the truth really somewhere in the middle? Do you guys lean one way or another on that?
For us, last click is still king, whether we like it or not, but day-to-day, intraday performance is first click on platforms, and some form of MTA data-driven is considered on probably a quarterly basis. We talk about incrementality, but we're not there. Come to me if you actually have a great incrementality platform. I need it.
Yeah, no secret answers. Same here. Last click and then DDA is sort of the day-to-day.
Yeah, we media mix modeling, using partners for that, but it's always then some gut checks of like holdout groups between different matching DMAs to test different like new media mixes, right?
Got it. So there's a little bit of incrementality in there as well. Great. All right, so let's talk about successful brand campaigns. I know that Movado recently launched a very big campaign for the fall. Would love to hear a little more about that before I pass it on to the other panelists to talk about brand campaigns. But tell us a little bit about the planning that went into that and the results that you're seeing thus far.
Yeah, so we just launched on September 4th our biggest campaign in the history of the brand, and we're about 76 years old. 5 celebrities across entrepreneurs, actors, actresses, musicians, and athletes, all set to Ludacris's song Stand Up. He is the face of our campaign. This was a monster and also a massive risk. And the fear is still real every single day, and I will tell you this, and it's exciting and real, and we're all still very scared. But it's doing great. And so this really started a year ago for us, right? So it was, hey, we think we're going to do this, but we got to sell a lot of watches if we're going to do this. And so it was, we want brand. We want to build brand equity. We want to build awareness and virality and people to be excited about our brand. But hey, Alicia, we still need to sell all the watches. And so a year ago, we sat in a room and said, what does this look like? What do we need to do this? And so it started with, what content do we need? How many cuts of video do we need across the funnel? What is the goal of it? So before they even shot, I said, I need a 60, a 45, a 30, a 10, 5 15s, and 6 6s. For me to have full funnel, everything I need. And then I said, that's it? And I said, that's it. And then I told them what each of those videos were supposed to do. Was it supposed to just drive recall? Was it supposed to drive an engagement and a click? Was it supposed to actually get somebody to click on an email or to shop or just create the ad recall in the consideration stage? And then we talked about still photography. Then once we got everything back, then we started to talk about who are our audiences. What is the goal of each audience? How far back are we thinking about our look-back windows? My favorite thing to talk about is a look-back window. No one thinks about it. I am here to tell you that it's probably, you got to go back farther than you actually think. Our best look-back windows, 120 to 180 days. We would never have been running that if we didn't test it. And so we really started to kind of have this cross-functional conversation and then say, okay, what does good look like from the very start? So we just talked a lot about like KPIs and how we're measuring. I literally had to sit there and say, okay, after the first 30 days, nothing's changing. My leadership said impossible. And I said, I promise you nothing's changing. On day 31, we'll probably start to see changes in engagement rates. I'm hoping to see more traffic to site. I'm hoping to see people staying on the site longer. And so we really set up these expectations from the very beginning. And because we had such a plan, from the CEO down globally, everybody started to have a bit more excitement. And they had confidence. And so now, even though we're all still scared and still very risk is real, we're all very excited because each day when they say, Alicia, how's it looking? And I say, day 5, they always go, I know, I'm just checking. And then on like day 31, they're like, okay, we know where we're supposed to be. And if we're not there, we can make a decision of, do we need to change our investment? So it's a lot of planning, communication, and being honest and upfront around expectations, because at the end of the day, your leadership is probably very scared to make very large investments, and that's okay. It's your job to kind of share in that and build that confidence in them, and then have a plan of when it goes wrong. Because not everything will be right. And so if they know that you're prepared on like, here's gonna be my next pivot, or here's where we're gonna go next, then they're really excited that they know what's gonna happen next and how to continue to build success off of it. And I'm sure, Vivian, probably at Clorox, you've done a lot of this, more than us.
It's interesting because I think, unlike kind of where the two of you were, where it was heavy performance and then trying to back into brand, convincing CFOs and brand. I mean, traditional CPG is brand only, and there is no conversation about performance, right? And so, now my thinking has changed a lot about brand, and so I think with brand, I'm a huge advocate of brand marketing, like thinking about what does the brand stand for, what is the storytelling, what is the content that we're really trying to communicate across, and then using performance channels and measurement of all of the media channels to say, now what's the best way to get this message across, right? Like, we know that consumers need multiple touch points, and so how can we do social retargeting? How do we actually have like product-specific campaigns that follow on the overall macro brand campaign so that it has a longer lifespan and that we have a longer tail that actually generates sales in return, right? And so that's a lot of kind of where we brought in performance where it hadn't existed. It is, we're not trying to run this separate campaign in a separate silo over here. It's, hey, we just need like a couple of cut downs. How do we do like shorter video snippets that we can run in all of these like new media channels, and then buying and optimizing in a different way, right? So on a CPA basis, on a ROAS basis, versus just something like reach and frequency.
I love how you guys are doubling down on creative as one of the key factors in making that decision to go from brand to performance or from performance to brand. Creative is such a critical piece of that, and thinking about what's different. What does brand creative look like versus what does performance creative look like? Michael, do you have a point of view on that?
I've got a couple, actually.
Great.
So for one, on the actual example of great creative, this goes back more than a decade ago when I was still at the online retailer. We were probably a few $100 million in revenue at this point. The company was called Build.com, and we realized that we had a brand awareness problem. People didn't know. We were selling home improvement products on the internet, and everybody knew Home Depot, but nobody knew who we were. And so at that time, YouTube had sort of come up and was this very common household thing. YouTube hadn't necessarily weaponized the advertising machine that they have now, where any Google rep that you ever meet with is going to lead with YouTube and tell you how great it is. But we really thought that this was an interesting way for us to, we were still scrappy, to cost effectively tell a story. So we went and started looking for, at the time, what I don't even think they were called influencers at the time, or creators now, but we looked for some of the top YouTube channels. There was one called Mystery Guitar Man who did a lot of these really creative musical arrangements using sort of esoteric things. And so we had him create a pretty long-form video of creating a musical piece using a bunch of home improvement widgets and gadgets and things like that. And it ended up being this incredibly well-performing piece of creative. And our process for that, kind of as you said, it didn't take us a year, but I think that's a great example of the amount of time it takes to produce a really, really great piece of brand creative. It's that long. I mean, you have to go through all of the calculus to make sure that it's set up right. And I also think the expectation setting is everything. So for us, that performed really, really well, and we wound up using pieces from that for many years in our creative. The second thought that I have just around creative in general, one of the best brand marketers I've ever heard speak is a guy named Noel Mack, who is the chief brand officer for Gymshark, local here to the UK. And Noel spoke at a Shopify conference I was at a while ago, and basically he said, look, most of the other brands that are going to be presenting here shoot, and I was thinking of this as you were saying it, they'll shoot a piece of creative and they'll chop it in aspect ratio, they'll chop it in terms of length, and then they'll go and syndicate it out to their TikToks and their Instagram and everything else.
Yeah.
He said, we're different. We shoot one piece of creative for our TikTok and a totally different piece of creative for our YouTube. Which, I mean, again, they've got plenty of resources, and so they can afford to do that. But his raison d'etre for that was actually really logical. He said, we have a deep understanding of the audiences for each of those channels, and we know they're really different.
Yeah.
And so we know that our YouTube audience is much older than our TikTok audience, and we know that the things that they're interested in and they'll resonate with are much different. And so they took the time to really reject traditional marketing principles, which would be, we're making this fairly expensive piece of creative, so we're going to go chop it up and put it into a bunch of different aspect ratios. He said, saw that, we're going to go out and just make one. And at the time, Gymshark, this is probably 6 years ago, they had more TikTok followers than Nike. So it was working.
Yeah, definitely. Channel first creative is so important. A lot of marketers are still using the same creative on Meta as they are on TikTok, and that doesn't work as well as TikTok first creative, as an example. Let's talk collaboration. So I think the creative conversation segues really nicely into this next topic. Most of the time at companies, the performance marketing team that's executing on that is a different team than the brand marketing team. And so collaboration becomes this big question of how do these teams work together? What's the overlap and collaboration that needs to happen to make it a very seamless customer journey? Vivian, can you talk a little bit about that, like at Clorox, and even now as you're thinking through, like taking a team that is very brand focused and how you transition to becoming a performance marketing team as well, but still holding the brand equity and the ethos of what the team has been doing intact, and actually creating an asset around that?
Yeah. I think really it starts with education, right? And building actual like interpersonal trust, and that stuff takes a lot of time. Like direct to consumer at Clorox, performance marketing was not anything that these like traditionally trained like brand marketers thought about or cared about, and so it had to be in a way that wasn't like, now we're going to ask you to do 10 more things in your day just so that we have like extra assets and so forth. So we started with like very simply like taking what is already created from a creative perspective, so forth, just running it in some of these like performance media channels, search, running what I said like product focused retargeting. Things are non-threatening essentially, right? And then you start to show the results. One of the really kind of compelling pieces that got folks to change their mind was the first-party data that we were able to collect through D2C and through these more performance channel. Then the brand campaigns use this for audience lookalikes and targeting segmentation. And surprise, like these are the best performing segments, right? So then now they're like incentivized to invest more in our area so that they can also make their campaigns look better. So I think it's really thinking through how to help serve another team's goals and bring them along the way on education. And this is now a few companies that go like way more extreme on it. We did this and actually went so extreme as to pool all media dollars together under the performance team, but we had dedicated budgets that are for buying brand media versus performance media. But the thesis was essentially like, we'd rather have folks who are very familiar with the ins and outs of the channels, what levers to pull, what KPIs, like highly data-driven analytics folks running all of the media for our company, even though they had very different goals. So that's like a more extreme way. We saw a lot of success there, so I felt like there's a part of me that's always trying to drive towards something like that. So instead of silos, having it pulled together, but having folks who value brand and performance equally.
Definitely, yeah. I think dedicated budgets, and I'm assuming dedicated like KPIs for those budgets as well that are different, uniquely different from each other to make those decisions.
Well, I think also Vivian brought up an important part, which is building trust. And so I will say at Movado Group, collaboration is truly at the core of our culture, and it's not for everybody, but building trust is a really big way. And one of the first things when I came to the company 6 years ago was I approached it with I don't know anything that's very special, right? So I can teach you everything I know, so that way you know what I'm talking about and you have comfort and you have confidence in what I'm saying as well, and you're not feeling like I am trying to maybe talk circles around you just to get to sway your opinion. And it worked really well for leadership, and it worked really well on the brand teams too, and now they actually come to me from the digital side and test a lot of creatives and ask me to bring that back to them. So we've really created this kind of like feedback loop and built-in trust to be able to say, hey, like, I know you really love this. It's not working in this part of the funnel, but let me test it here. Or I know you didn't want me to put this in mid-funnel or upper funnel because we still think so traditionally sometimes, but I'm here to tell you that it is going to work and I'm going to show you. And so we take a lot more risk, and we're seeing that our dollars are able to go a lot further from a creative point of view. So I thought that was a really important part that you brought up on you got to build the trust first.
Yep. Absolutely, and those learnings from each stage of the funnel to influence other stages of the funnel, like this conversation is bigger than just media dollars, right? Like organic social is a brand channel. How do you utilize that to gain learnings for free before putting paid dollars behind it to amplify with ad dollars? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to think through that, and really insightful comments there. As for the folks in the room, how do they know if they're too brand or too performance heavy in their budget? Like, what are those triggers that people should be looking for as they're looking at their business, their growth, their customer acquisition, and their budgets in general to kind of think about that investment a little better? Are there kind of things that come to mind as far as what to look for? What are the red flags?
I mean, I can share that for us, the first red flag is that you're just seeing with zero changes, your return and efficiency start to decline, and then also at the same time, potentially your top line revenue. And so about when I first came here, we were only spending in performance. I was definitely in that bucket, and will raise my hand. And consistently, we would see things get better when we spent in brand, but we were big believers that we would spend around Mother's Day, Father's Day, and then holiday, and no other time. And so I could prove to them with data, like, hey, when I do this, I see more search volume, I see more traffic to site, I see this long tail efficiency of where I'm able to drive more sales while holding my return and my ROAS at the bottom. And then when we turn it off, you can see really starting to struggle. So actually I used 2 years worth of data, and it was in the heart of COVID, and everything was very stressful. And I said, if you give me always on budgets, I bet you I can create this ability to have a higher efficiency with a balanced, actually even higher growth rate if you let me spend always on. Now, it took 2 years to convince them, but last holiday season, they gave me a budget to have always on brand for the second half. And I was able to drive 20% more top line growth while increasing 50 cents on ROAS. And so that's like, when you start to really put those numbers, if you go to your CFO and say, if you give me this much money, I can model out how much more I'm gonna give you at the top with a better profit, they're going to start to listen to you. So I didn't get to where I am today in budgets and spend by just coming in and saying, hi, I'd like, millions of dollars. It was a stepwise approach, but it was built in trust. It was built with driving the data, and it was showing where exactly I was seeing declines in engagement in remarketing pools, declines in traffic, and opportunity to be able to bring much more efficiency into the funnel at cheaper cost when you're thinking about reaching people on a reach and frequency, a CPM, versus everything being on a cost per visit or a CPC, which is further down the funnel. So that really did, by identifying those and then like monitoring them, it did help us kind of get to where we are today, which I think is why we are starting to kind of have this success.
I think a lot of times what changes the conversation is when like something's going south and it's going wrong, right? So the things I look at that like are going wrong is organic branded searches are declining, right? Your CPA is getting more expensive in these performance channels, and then the retargeting pools are getting smaller, or you're just increasing frequency on the same people, not actually growing the pool, right? All three of these things to me are, hey, we don't have enough upper funnel people, traffic, impressions, whatever it is, to actually make performance efficient as you move down, right? And so I think those are the triggers to have that conversation of like, hey, let's try investing, some more like upper funnel, and then you watch those same metrics.
Yeah, those are great ones. I'd add one more to that list. If your year-over-year customer growth rate is flat or declining, churn is a natural part of any business, but this idea of the leaky bucket a lot of times comes from not investing enough in top of funnel to bring new people to your brand. A lot of people, as you guys know, are not aware that on many channels, when you're prospecting from a mid to bottom funnel perspective, they're finding people who already have intent to buy. You're getting the people that are at the bottom of the funnel that are going to convert very quickly. But filling that funnel is really what this whole conversation is about.
The other easy signal is just your performance campaigns constantly hitting daily budget. So again, if you're looking for an easy sign that you might be underspending in performance and maybe overspending in brand, that's another easy one to look out for, because every company I've ever come into, that's been happening. The CFO or whoever sort of mandated these, again, always on, but always on with this tiny little daily budget, and you're constantly hitting that. Well, hitting your ROAS goals, probably a good sign to maybe siphon some off of brand.
Yeah, definitely. That is a good problem to have if you can spend more and maintain efficiency. So
1000%.
yes, that's a great one. So with the few minutes we have left, I want to do a quick lightning round for the folks to take away as like an actionable next step. For people who are looking to invest more in brand coming out of this conversation, what is the channel that you would recommend that they start with and why?
We know you have something to say here.
Michael brought it up earlier, and I swear I do not work for Google, but I will literally fall on a sword for YouTube every single day. I can tell you it fundamentally changed my business. It is a lower performance channel. It is a brand building channel. It is the only channel with truly a full funnel attribution within the platform that is very clean. You can run the different metrics. You can build trust within your organization, especially if you're already running it. You can start to inch your way up and try different optimization tactics, not just running if you want to have it run for action. You can do demand generation, and you probably have creative that works. I promise you. Like, we started running our TV commercial. We just chopped it up and put it up there, and it worked. So I will fall on that sword.
I have sort of two answers to this, but one of them actually is a callback to something that Vivian said earlier, which is about Clorox's D2C approach and the value of first-party data. So before I even get into a favorite marketing channel, if you're a brand and you're not investing in D2C, you're missing out. You're missing out on this treasure trove of first-party data that's relevant for your existing business that can lift your Amazon business or your retail media spend or whatever else, and you're also robbing yourself of future data to train an LLM as AI continues to be an influence. For us, my answer for that would be connected TV, which is honestly kind of just an extension. It's a very similar concept to what you said with YouTube, where and I love the notion you have of collapsing the funnel, the ability to take your existing creative, as you said, chop it up, sort of chef style, and serve it out. And connected TV is another great way to do that. Historically, as a marketer in, I don't know, the last 20, 30 years, TV was always viewed, linear TV was viewed as this like sort of US Super Bowl, spend $100 million on a campaign and then pray that it actually drives value. With YouTube and CTV, like that's no longer the case. You get an enormous amount of measurability and just data around whether or not that's performing. And so I do kind of agree that funnel is imploding with these new channels and these new advances. It's made being a marketer so much more complicated, of course.
And I'm hearing a common theme around video. Video first.
Yes.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and not necessarily go channel. I really feel like influencers and finding the right influencers, content creators to tell your brand story can be game-changing, because I think it has the ability to go quickly from that like high-level brand, what do you stand for, down to here's a specific product that I love, and the consumers, especially younger consumers, are willing to make that jump like in the span of one video, right? And so if you get that like content right, then and then of course distributing across like social and so forth, like I think it's almost like the hack of like between brand and performance that you can do two in one.
Yeah, the beauty of digital is the ability to collapse the funnel. Now we can have metrics around brand and drive that all the way through to conversion, and influencers is a great, although not media channel, it's a channel in and of itself, and it can be utilized across different media channels, so great.
Farzana, what's yours?
I think I'm on the CTV bandwagon, personally. I'm with Mike there. Well, thank you all. It's been a great discussion. Time has flown. These folks are around if you guys have any questions after the panel. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.